All right, welcome once again to another Gray Pages, and we're here with buddy Alan Hirsch today.
Hershey.
With Hershey, and why don't you guys
Hershey
go ahead and
Meister.
just guide us in?
Well, hey, everybody knows if they know us or Alan, they know me and Alan are like
Lovers.
we are lovers, and
Something like that.
we have been such good friends for it's got to be going on 20 years, somewhere in there. I was over doing some church plant training in Australia, and somebody said you got to meet this dude, and went over to Alan's hometown, sniffed around the old restaurant, and ended up in St. Kilda with used condoms on the front porch.
Not mine.
All sorts of stories we could get into.
We're
We're not going to give details, but learned that both Alan and Deb like live real mission with real people, and fell in love with them, and then had the beautiful privilege of seeing Alan come into the States. And then, man, I think about like all the crazy changes in the church that have happened, honestly, Alan, since you've come in. I tell people all the time, I think Alan Hirsch will go down as our generation's great missiologist. And he's also a delightful hang. Usually you don't get the two of those together.
Which might be the best part.
Me and Alan have probably has been fantastic bourbons and gin drinks.
On the tables, don't we, bro?
Yep. So I don't know. Here's some things people don't know about Alan. If you stay at his place, he likes to make chilaquiles, his own little special Mexican breakfast. Very good at that. Delightful. You also want to know that Alan Hirsch, unlike many thought leaders of today, actually has a very deep, abiding walk with Jesus. Like when Alan has told me about, actually, it wasn't you, it was me talking to Deb in your kitchen, and Deb's saying, yeah, Alan will just spend 4 or 5 hours with the Lord in the morning. It doesn't take any appointments till I think it was 10 or 11 a.m. because you just like to muse with the Lord. And I think a lot of the writings, holy cow, it's got to be 15 books by now since you've come to the States. A lot of those, I know, they were such crazy books. The stuff that you were talking about with Apest and Metanoia and Permanent Revolution, and then the biggies, Forgotten Ways, Shaping Things to Come. Lots of other stuff in between there, but I know a lot of that, Alan, was birthed out of just time. You were recovering from the bourbon the night before, but getting up and literally just waiting for the Holy Spirit to show you things. So anyway, you're my favorite person. I know I'm yours. Let's just move on.
It's very true. But now that, we were confessing our love publicly, I think Hugh is, I'm going to just out and say it. I say to him all the time, he's the most Jesus-like person I know. And
unless you live with me, Taylor knows.
Yeah, that might be true, but I've seen enough, and I know something about Jesus, and I think you are the dude, man. So I love it. And then Taylor and we've met and quite a number of times. Also, I see somewhat of a radical, revolutionary, up yoursy kind of guy, my kind of people. We haven't had enough time together. I've never seen him with the bourbon, but I look forward to that one day.
Yep, for sure. For sure. Well, hey, we wanted to kick it off. I wanted to ask you a question, Alan.
Well, hold on. Let me say something.
You got things?
I wasn't going to say this, but yeah, since we're doing it, it was good to be able to share this with you in person. I mean, I think, Alan, we met the first time. It was you might remember because it was a while ago, but it was 2017. I was with Neil Cole. We were in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah.
And we were doing something together at your 100 Movements conference. And I guess that was what it was called, 100M or something like that. But since then we've been together a lot. But I've said this on, I think, even multiple podcasts. But it was Dr. Perkins who ignited something in me. I guess we've all had the moment, you know, where we talk about this when we talk about why we write. We don't write to change people's minds necessarily. We write to give a language and a lens to what's already in people, to help them kind of move to that next step. Most of the world I was grieving about this last night with my wife, how so much of the world, whether it's Christian or non, are just so polarizing all the time now. Like you can't find a leader, a thought leader, a revolutionary, a gentle spirit that someone's not hardcore against. It could be Mother Teresa, Hugh Halter, Alan Hirsch. It doesn't matter. There's going to be a whole faction of people that despise this person and that get online to try to discredit them. It's such a polarizing world that we live in. But in this kind of longing that we tend to all have of just finding truth and goodness and Jesus in everything, this hunger was inside of me, and I think it was Dr. Perkins that unlocked it when I first came in contact with his writings, and then his life, and then some of his work in Chicago with Lawndale community. But then it was you and your buddy Frosty with the Shaping of Things to Come that was the merging of everything for me. And the reason I bring that up is because it's really cool. John, you sent us a comment that somebody wrote just yesterday, maybe.
Yeah.
That said they feel like Brave Cities is the merging of CCDA movement and the missional movement or something. Wasn't it something like that?
That was exactly what it said. Yeah.
Yeah. And I was like, no, it is.
They were like, you probably wouldn't say it this way, but here's what I see. And I was like, amen.
No, we say that. And it's part of it is because we have been handed something from this guy and this guy and our great friend now, Dr. John Perkins, and many others, of course. So I am glad we're friends now, man. And I think that what we were talking about before this whole thing started was we did a session. We were together at a conference, all four of us, a couple of weeks ago. And you guys are together in Tampa, Florida right now, right? Yeah. So John is not in Australia. Alan is in Tampa, but you were there and your reaction moved us.
Bro, I
And
cried.
so you cried.
Weeping like a baby. I couldn't talk to anyone.
There were some real tears, and we were just like, well,
loved it.
let's
So
at
good to
least talk
hear.
about that some,
Yeah.
so we can feel good about ourselves.
Yeah, why were you getting a
I
little
was
misty
crying
there?
because it was, no, I'm saying, okay, I ruined a good moment, but I've just missed
It wasn't
but I was
the
really
bourbon the
weeping.
night before.
No,
Say it again.
it wasn't the bourbon the night before. I'm going to get a reputation here, but yeah. But no, seriously, I was so moved by what I heard because I've been, with you guys, following you guys so long now. And I love the book. I think it's such a well articulated. It's a good combination of the two of you, but it's a great book, and I do believe it's destined to kind of make a real mark. I hope it does, and I think it will. I think it's going to be a defining book for a generation. So, yeah, well done, fellas. Can I be as someone older? Not much older than you. He might look younger, but he's not. A little bit. But I'm very proud of you, and I love what you guys are doing, and yeah.
Hey, give us a little old man wisdom. As we do get older, we do get more philosophical. We also try to make more impact, like before we go, right? When you just think about the church, and you don't have to talk Brave City-ish, but just when you think about the church in new forms or in different forms, and even in the business zone, like in the real world, what are you optimistic about and what are you pessimistic about? Honestly, like your most honest thoughts.
Oh, the pessimism is easy one. But let me start with the optimistic side. And again, I will refer to what you guys are doing and what we experienced somewhat at the microchurch conference in various ways. You know, so you get people from all over. There were about 300 different entities or agencies there, about
Right.
1,000 people, I think, something like that. It's very promising. And again, the oldies here, you and myself, been around a long time, and we've seen conferences. You know, Centralized was one, around the missional conversation, all that. But this is really good because I think the microchurch is a concrete expression of missional. So you can talk about missional as a very conceptual idea, and it wins hearts because it's how do you argue against it? It's kind of deeply theologically correct. And there's no plan B for the church, is there? I mean, like, what are we going to go back to? Church growth, you know, or kind of guerrilla evangelism with 3 circles and that nonsense? You know, there is no way back to that. So we missional is correct, but when we see these things, we see proof of concept,
Right.
And because it's concrete, it's not referring to an idea; it's an expression of an idea, and so it's hard to short circuit around that. And again, what you guys are doing in Alton and beyond, because it derives from elsewhere, but also it's going on elsewhere. You're giving language and you're giving proof of concept to a whole new expression of missional, and that's a huge gift, because most people don't get the idea. So this is about diffusion of innovation dynamics. You know that curve. You know, innovator, early adopter, 16%, and then the chasm, it goes to the 35% of the middle adopter. And the thing is, middle adopters, they can't follow something because it's an idea. They got to see it. And if they see it, they might believe it. And what I think you guys are doing is not just sharing ideas, you're actually giving proof of concept. And that is huge, and might be bigger than even you realize. If we're able to cross the chasm of the ideas into action, and also for you guys taking the stuff of church outside of the confines of the church walls into the arenas of all of life, it just gives a huge way forward for others to follow. So we need you to succeed and show us the way forward.
Yep. You guys remember that? Go ahead, Al.
We can come back to the pessimism thing because there's a lot of that going on.
So that scripture, Son of Man came eating and drinking. And then right after that, it says that wisdom is proved right by her offspring. So we always know the first part, but in a very real sense, I mean, we get challenged all the time. I mean, you've been challenged your whole life, from Australian, mates to hearing this. Everybody always challenges. I always like to say that usually they challenge anybody that's on the front edge of innovation, right? But nobody challenges back and says, well, yeah, but your model has been proven. Like, we've seen it. So why do you get to keep doing what you've been doing all these years when we know the results? So why are you so cranky with the innovators? But it is true. If we can just look at what we're seeing, we go, wisdom is proved right by her. If she's making kids and babies, and you see growth and movement and people smiling and working hard, we should pay much more attention to that and not be so afraid of maybe some lower ecclesial forms.
Well, I've never ever heard that kind of verse explained well, and that just kind of dropped for me. It absolutely makes sense to me. I've never understood it.
Well, that's why I'm here. Everybody knows it. I'm here for the deep theological.
Yep. You were called a missiologist too recently, I believe, very, very publicly.
I don't know what I am.
You're
definitely not that.
You're a missiologist.
How long have you been doing this, Alan? Like, legitimately?
Oh, bro. I'm 64 now, which is kind of weird. Uh, it's kind of really weird. Um, I, I mean, I've kind of been involved in kind of weird communities ever since I first became a believer. Uh, I came to the Lord on copious amounts of marijuana with a whole lot of other people, who was.
And you know, have you heard John's story yet? He was basically, both of you were
Okay.
high when you came to faith.
Oh yeah,
Yeah, I met Jesus on LSD.
Okay,
and
well-
I sobered up and was a disciple. I was a commissioned missionary.
Yeah, I was at a youth camp.
Oh well, God uses everything, brother.
Yeah.
But my wife came to the Lord. Debs came to the Lord on acid,
Yeah,
watching the late great Planet Earth.
Oh, really?
With her sister, where they'd just been seeing pink elephants jumping across the road, dodging the pink elephants going home, and then their drug dealer showed them the late great Planet Earth,
Mm-hmm.
their drug dealer, and they became believers instantly, and they've never turned back.
Wow.
So yeah, I'm just saying, everyone now uses psilocybin, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
Maybe there's something in this.
Yeah, it's a common story.
But to jokes aside, I mean, like to your question there, Ty, is that I've kind of been part of that with and that group that first came to the Lord, from the underworld of Melbourne. We eventually became a community, became known as South Melbourne Restoration Community, and so that was really our first form of church. We were all the weirdos from the underworld, and and that it's kind of been happening ever since. I'd be honest and say that much in the last years, particularly my American years, I feel a little bit of I don't know, an imposter in the local setting now, because much of my work has been translocal. I think it's legit. I feel I've been called to that, and to be able to address kind of broader paradigm issues in the broader church and all that. But on the local setting, I wish I had much more of a story like you guys have got.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't feel I've got it. Debs did lead a church in Los Angeles called the Tribe of LA, which was birthed out of Burning Man. And, we used to go to Burning Man as part of that expression too. So trying to just keep on the edges of things. But honestly, right now, we're living in and Hugh has a good laugh at this every time, because I've actually got a little truck, and that just makes him laugh every time. But yeah, we're living on a piece of property, nothing as fancy as Hugh's, but we're there. But yeah, it's weird. I don't know.
You may not know though. I don't know if I told you, but their little community, they come to faith out of drugs and crazy community stuff. And they actually started a restaurant. Was the restaurant the only business that you had?
Yes. In that time, in that community, yes, we've been a bit of an overreach, but yeah, there you go. Yeah.
No, it is amazing though. Like, and that was 30 years ago, right? Really?
Yeah, be about right. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, they were literally doing exactly what we're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys were always so far ahead of like the normal curve, but your original story is literally the story that we're painting in the Brave Cities, which is wild to me.
Well, the difference is that I got my ass handed back to me.
No, that's not different.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
That's about right.
No, that's right on pace.
Yeah. Well, I've learned from my failures more than successes, though.
Yeah, but we always tell like people that don't add the business element, we're like, you're going to get your ass handed to you anyway.
Yeah.
Like if you just do the
Yeah.
normal church, it's not like they escape that. We just have it's a different type of a spanking that you endure when you try to integrate business with mission. And so whatever.
And I don't know we don't have to get off on this granular idea, but I don't know why that's a regular conversation for us anyway. I think that I was talking with a team that we work with doing some incredible stuff in West Texas yesterday, and he went right into that conversation of getting his ass handed to him and things not working out and this failing and this going, and And I once again had to remind my brother that we were never asked to create the rain. We were never asked to make the vegetables grow. We just we were handed a tool, and we were pointed to a field, and we got the privilege of kind of tilling and working alongside the one who makes the rain and makes the stuff grow. We don't know what growth is. There's a lot of mysticism in this calling of God's people. You've heard us, you've said this before we did, Alan, but we just feel like the story has never changed. We feel like from the very beginning, there was an ecosystem and there was a people, and they were called to be a city on a hill. And as that kind of got convoluted and Babylon crept into the story, it still remained all through the old covenant, all through the new covenant, all through life now, throughout our church history, is there's an ecosystem. There's a people that are called to tend it, that are invited into tending it. And there's one thing that I saw a long time ago in my years in traditional ministry is we had figured out a way to circumvent drought and famine. So I actually think the church is supposed to go through drought and famine. I think that we are supposed to go through times of suffering, of rain not coming, but we figured out how to make our own rain. Are y'all tracking with me?
Yeah.
And I looked up, and I was 6, 7 years in and had never seen any sort of drought or famine. I also think that our things are supposed to die. We birth new things, we plant them, they grow, and then at some point they die. And I see people regularly still say, like, well, they failed because that thing died. I actually saw an online conversation from a good friend of ours in Chicago yesterday, where he had made a beautiful post about things he had learned in 40 years of church planting. And someone commented on it and said, well, then why did your thing die?
Mm-hmm.
As if that's failure. That's so interesting. If, like, as a parent, if one of my kids got a disease and died, or like has happened now multiple times in our community just this year, mothers have lost children. We've had, I think, 2 or 3 miscarriages.
So you don't go, well, that's a failure.
Well, you failed as a mother. No, you don't create life and you don't take life, So I think that's a really important conversation that we're trying to infuse into leaders and risk takers, is like, you've been invited into an ancient story that you get to just be a part of. So relax, swing the, till the soil, swing the tiller, have fun with it, do it in a way that you love, but please don't base your kind of metrics of success over how much grew and didn't grow, or how long something lived and didn't live. What do you think about that?
No, I think it's very true. I number of things, come to mind. The whole idea of organic growth. A tree doesn't grow till it fills the sky. Different trees grow different size, 15 foot, 30 foot, 45. Nothing much more. There's a few.
They all have limits.
They've got limits because it's inherent. And how actually a tree survives is by reproducing itself. Actually, the sole purpose of a tree is reproduction. It doesn't have another purpose. It serves other things for us, but actually its purpose is to reproduce itself and to create a forest. And I was just only saying today somewhere, or last night somewhere, to someone, that someone in the traditional kind of setting, I said the best way to preserve tradition is not to wear your granddad's old hat. Sorry, Hugh. But to have children. And if you do your child rearing well, they'll carry your story into the future as well as your DNA. It'll be different.
Yep.
But if you were just a controlling parent and made them like you'd probably go to jail by the time they're 25, So yeah, children, having kids is huge. And I think the idea of reproduction is very, very important. what I loved about what you guys, and again, this is just listening to you the other day, having browsed, of course, and read the book much earlier. But I love the comparison between the Babylonian kind of ecosystem and the kingdom ecosystem, a Jesus one. And I think that you've played that out beautifully well. And then helping us see what an ecosystem comprises of. But again, it breaks the walls of the kind of the very narrow understanding of the church. And you're living out the kind of the definition of ecclesia in the New Testament. I don't know if you guys mentioned this or not, but it's true that Paul could have used multiple terms for the word church. Well, we use church, which doesn't really translate to anything particularly, but synagogue, which is kind of the Jewish form of gathering, which just means coming together, which actually could have worked just fine, by the way. And there were a few others that he could have fellowship, but the few others that he could have used. He uses this word ecclesia, and what the ecclesia is the elders of the city who were elected to be elders, and they would meet. They existed for the benefit of the city as a whole. And what they would do is on the Saturday mornings, whatever, they would come together at the gates of the city. And if there were any issues that the community was grappling with, there was divorce or there was some sort of abuse going down, the elders would resolve it, because people would bring their issues to the elders, or there was someone needed food, the elders would, provide for that person with the resources of the city. And it seems to me that's what you guys are doing very, very well there. And you've re-articulated a notion of church as ecclesia, as a community that exists for the benefit of the city. And I think that's really powerful. And it's a reclaiming or recovery of a very ancient idea. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. I mean, if every church thought the ecclesia is for the good of the city, it's like, boom.
Yeah. Well,
But we're not. We're generally for the good of our ecclesia.
And when we say that, Alan, because I want you to comment on this, when we say that, we never mean the municipality. We kind of argue.
We call the municipality Babylon.
Right.
Right.
We kind of argue like you can't change your city, but you can build a new one, architect a new one. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, again, I think that's very subversive. I love it. And this kingdom ecosystem,
good word.
In the midst of Babylon, right in the middle of it, there's this kind of emergence of a different way of living under a different king, but it looks the same to everyone, but it's a different system operating there. So it's very subversive, and it's just like the yeast in the dough, how the kingdom works in society, hidden, secret, and eventually it does its thing, takes over,
we've never talked about the art of the book cover, but a lot of that came from kind of Taylor's dream that the kingdom city is like a tree that you're growing up inside. So the cover does show like a cityscape, because you can't grow the tree without, like, because you do care about that cityscape. But it's really more this organic tree that grows up right in the middle of that,
Guys, as I was thinking this morning about this conversation about to have, it reminded me, what you're doing reminded me of listening Yubin, the myologist, brilliant guy. I had dinner with him once.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool.
Pretty Jesus-like kind of
We've
guy.
only heard about him.
Yeah. And and he would say that the church is this, and this is the words he used: sign, symbol, instrument, and foretaste.
Foretaste, yeah.
Of the kingdom of God. And sign, symbol, so it's a sign, it points; a symbol, it embodies something that's meaningful. Instrument, it serves the purposes of the kingdom. And then the foretaste is like scratch and smell, right? We don't do that. There's not things like scratch and smell. Yeah, scratch and sniff. Like you meant to like scratch it. Oh, this is the kingdom, And I think it just seems appropriate to actually to re-invoke his description of you.
I've repeated this a lot on other shows, but like I've always thought of this idea of like there's a couple versions of this, but that's that taste, that what was it? What was the word?
Sign, symbol, instrument, foretaste.
The foretaste. So like this idea of like a rehearsal, like a rehearsal of the things to come, or a flash mob, like this artistic endeavor kind of in the presence of the public. This pretending that it's here now. So tending to the future today, but like that, exactly that, the idea of being like, we're gonna embody this thing here and now, in an effort to lean into tomorrow and the kingdom coming.
The other, that reminds me of a phrase that I like to use about the church. A faithful church is a prefigurative community. That is, it prefigures what will happen when Jesus is fully king, when he returns. But you're actually living into that community now. So you're actually prefiguring it for other people. So prefiguration is another idea we can throw in.
I got a question about something. So when, Revelation gives us these images that are kind of like, I don't know, sign pointing into the fog a little bit, like what we're trying to envision and what we're leaning into. What do you make of and there was no temple in the city? So that's always like really resonated with me, and thinking of like what we know as ecclesial structures or synagogue or temples and these systems that we mimic in our effort at church. And then just wondering, like, what does the city with no temple in it look like? Like, what do you make of that?
Well, actually, this is another wonderful metaphor there, because I hadn't thought of that actually in light of this conversation, but actually is like the church will actually have become, it would be almost made obsolete, because I think it goes on to say the presence of God is the temple, isn't it?
Yep, that's right. That he's among us and walks with us.
So you don't need a place where you need to go and meet with God. God will be fully present. So actually, the Revelations 21, right? So the final.
So when you say that, just the thing that jumped out is like, you won't need it. Do you need it? So like here and now, is that a future you won't need it? Like, I just wonder about that. The whole like and this isn't to like overstate some critical piece. It's a real genuine question of like, if that won't be there, what does that mean for us, like here and now today?
Interesting question. I would say, I mean, like, I do think there's a place for community, but that can be expressed in many different ways, isn't it? I love to play this kind of, again, I've done this recently with someone, so forgive me if it was with any of you guys. But I was talking to a group of people who were doing microchurch, or wanting to do microchurch in Kansas City, actually. And I said to them, like, and they were starting one, and I was thinking, but many of them come from kind of standard forms of church. And so they were wondering, is this really a church, right? So is this legitimately a church? And I'd say, yeah, look at what's going on in the page of the New Testament, very much so. You look at the book of Acts, it's pretty much the standard form of church. But besides that, let's cook up a church. Let's think about a church as a recipe that we're going to cook up one, right? So don't go formulaic, no theological formula, just a basic recipe we're going to cook. We're going to put it in the pot. I say, okay, so I'm going to put two things in the pot before we start, because we got them. Holy Spirit, because we won't even be having this conversation if it wasn't for the Spirit's prevening power. So that's going to be there. So we throw that's in the pot. We got the Bible, so we don't need it. There's more than enough Bibles going around. Even Trump's one is, there's Bibles going down. And so, okay, so we cook up a church. So we said to a group of people, what do you need to cook up? What's the first ingredient? One by one, what's the first ingredient? So people will say, people. Yep, okay, so we got some people. Okay, how many do we need? Well, not too many. 2 or 3,000, whatever. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be that many. Okay, so we got some people. Just people together ain't a church yet. So you say, okay, what do you need next? People say God. And I say, yeah, true. but the mosque down the road believes in God. Allah is a generic word for God. Most religious communities would say they believe in God. So that doesn't make us distinct. So, okay, let's play that a little bit more. Oh, Jesus. Okay, Jesus, okay? Now you got Jesus and people. That's different. Not just a bingo club anymore. We're a group of Jesus people. And when Jesus and people mix, there's a whole lot of goodness that goes down, healing, salvation, wholeness, reconciliation, the interior stuff, of the kingdom. Now, so let's change the formula a little bit and say a true encounter with God and Jesus results in, fill in the blanks. People say transformation. So say, is that discipleship? Discipleship?
Mhm.
And say, yep, that's, so we follow him, right? So if you're encountering Jesus, you'll follow him, right? Everyone agrees, okay? What's another one? Worship, right? If Jesus walks in the room, we're on our knees, we're worshiping. True, worshiping, that's appropriate. And worship, not just the singing songs in a very limited way, but offering our world back to God, which is a very big idea of worship, which is
Right.
it's the Bible, right? Big idea of offering every element of our life up to God.
Mhm.
And I say, well,
Sacrifice.
so let's do one more. True encounter with Jesus results in mission. We exist to extend the mission of God. We're the only people who can do that. We're set aside to be this people. And if you stop there, I say 5 elements: Jesus, people, creates a covenant community, worship, mission, discipleship. Do you have a church? Most people would say, I think we do. I think we might have a church there. And then I'll say, well, do you need a building for that? Not really. It might help. But it certainly doesn't have to be a certain shape building.
Right.
How many ways can you do this thing? There's many different ways you can fulfill that. So I think one of the challenges for people is to rethink what we think is church.
Yeah.
And the standard, what we call the marks of the church, are terrible. And the standard one is the word and sacrament, right? And what they mean is where there's preaching,
Yeah,
and where there's 2 or 3 sacraments, depending on your tradition, communion, Lord's Supper, and if you're Calvinist, church discipline. That's a sign of the kingdom, by the way, church discipline. What the? Where the heck does that come from?
that's y'all's favorite, isn't it?
We love them, church discipline. I'm saying,
We discipline each other.
but let me just finish that. So, like, really, so you've got people who preach and who do baptism and communion, and that's the definition of church for you. I can show you lots of places that do that stuff that Jesus do not belong there any longer. And by the way, and this I get from Neil Cole very well. Neil said, if you can define the church without Jesus, you can probably run the church without Jesus too. There's no mention of Jesus in there.
Right.
And that's fundamentally just foobar, actually.
Yep. Yep.
Fubar. Haven't heard that for a while.
It's a military term.
I
Military.
know.
Well,
Alan was in
I
the
mean-
military. Did you know that?
yeah, I did. I did. He's told me stories. You can hear us now?
Oh, perfectly. Yeah.
All right, this is hilarious. So while John and whoever's listening, the 26 of you, while John and Alan were talking at this beautiful location they're at, someone just starts cutting the grass right behind them. So we took a little technical break, and we're back on now. And I'm glad we're back on because we have at least 2 more thoughts we want to process
Oh,
Great.
with you, Dr. Hirsch. You go
No,
first.
I don't have, you got all 2 of them?
Well, I mean, yeah, I have 7, but
Wow.
we'll just go with 1 right now. Okay, so we're here. You're let's just say you're 35 years in to dreaming, pioneering, writing, planting, practicing, and what we've been talking about this whole time is how important it is for whoever comes after us to have something tactile. Like, theory is not enough. We need practitioners. That doesn't mean at some point in our lives that we don't kind of step back and move into this real significant translocal calling, which all 3 of us would say to you, thank you, keep doing it.
Yeah.
But I think you would say, But no, we need mostly practitioners. We need the church as we know it, like the church as we're seeing it before our eyes, to remain tactile. So I'm going, hey, look, Alan, where are we going? Like, what do you see 50 years from now? Because we genuinely feel like we've had some pretty significant moments or encounters. Is the guy cutting grass again?
You're good.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
We feel like we've had some pretty significant encounters with the Holy Spirit, with Jesus, with communication, where we see the church as we know it wrapping up. We see it ending. And we don't want to be caught off guard. So one of the dirty little secrets of Brave Cities that we don't talk about a lot in the book or even in some of our gray pages is it's actually like a prophetic, a foretelling of what the church can be. It's also an ancient recognition, right? Like we say, hey, let's look back. This is what the church has been for thousands and thousands of years. Like pre-New Testament, God's people functioned in this way. In the midst of Acts, God's people function this way. And post New Testament, God's people has functioned this way. But if I'm making sense, I'm saying, but it's also a necessary practice, because this thing that we understand in the West as the church, we feel like is ending. Where are the people going to find refuge? And that's why we're actually kind of pleading with leaders to at least consider what this ecosystem practice that God has given us for centuries is when that time comes. Is that
Yep.
put in a way that you can
Yep.
muse
So,
on?
yeah, so a couple of images come to mind in as you raise that. For one, actually, the trajectory on the, I'm not much into statistics. I always think people manipulate that stuff. Or it's easily
do,
manipulatable,
yeah.
To support the prevailing system usually. But actually, I've been looking at census statistics, so the national stats, the formal one in our country, but also in Canada and in the UK, and also trying to dig out the same kind of trends in the US. And certainly Europe follows the same trend. Now, I've got graphs for this, right, which are based on our national statistics. So the formal, when people fill in the form about, across the nation, how they self-identify. And the stats for people who still identify as Christians has followed a long trend of down. And then the people who do not identify with any particular religion, the so-called nuns, are on the up. And so in my country, Australia, and as well in Canada, very similar. We're a little ahead of them in this. We're about 5 years off from being where the two are equal, the same amounts in our population, which are, legacy Christianity, right? So in about 5 years' time, they'll be the same. And then you have to, following the same trend,
Right.
on the statistic, probably in my country in 2048, so say 2050, there'll be no more people identifying as Christians on the trend.
Right.
And that's just self-identification trend. We're done. And Canada's just a couple of years behind us. The UK is years ahead of us. So they now are in a case where there are less people who identify as Christian than who are, or more people less people identify as Christian than are non-Christian. In these heritage Christian countries. The States is following the same trend, and typically of the States, it goes like this. And then when Americans get on something, it trends up very quickly or goes down very quickly. And so it's like you see this thing, and right now it's not looking good. I mean, the church is hemorrhaging, guys. It's hemorrhaging. And millions of people are leaving. Oh, somebody said they're deconstructing. I think, yeah. And maybe rightly so, because the church has blown the brand. Gosh, it's lost credibility to even the insiders. I think our problem is that we haven't got a way forward for them, to go, well, no viable chance to get ahead of the game and try and do something about it. No one's got a plan on this thing. So it's a disaster, guys, waiting to happen. And it's just a matter of years or decades for most of our countries in the West. And I think,
Alan, I had a pretty large group of denominational guys probably about a year ago, and I just posed the question. I said, honestly, do you feel like the church has lost its saltiness? And the consensus with all of them was it had. Then I said, well, then what good is it? I just used the words of Jesus. It's now a useless endeavor, according to Jesus. So I feel like the smart money should be on the innovation curve.
Yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right. But isn't it amazing how people double down on failed strategies?
Yeah.
And partly because they don't know any better. So it's like an opportunity in COVID to actually reconceive the way we saw ourselves. A few people took it, but most people just returned because that's all they know. And the people leading the system, of course, well, the stakeholders in the prevailing system. So it's hard to get someone to understand something when their salary or identity requires that they don't understand it. And
one thing that I'm noticing, and I don't look into these contexts very often anymore. I'm pretty disconnected, but I have had some conversations recently since the book came out. People have reached out and whatnot. And one thing that I'm noticing in the South, which is where I'm from, is that the mega churches are becoming more mega. They're swallowing up everyone.
Consolidation.
Mega and mega.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. That's right. They're becoming more mega and they're becoming more mega. But
that's a new one.
But that seems to be the current and maybe final bastion of hope, is we're going to consolidate and report those growth numbers to try to at least show some signs of hope forward. But then if you're familiar with the Tony and Felicity Dale analogy of the rabbit and the elephant, then it becomes, to me, it's an extremely clever move from the Babylonian powers, because now we have one single entity throughout to take out and to kind of finalize this destruction of or whatever. So do you see that also?
Yeah. So again, I do. I think like the investment in the prevailing model and the lack of investment in the innovating form is huge. I say, like, often a budget is a theological document, right? It's money, how you spend your money shows what you value.
Yes.
And for most churches, they have almost zero in R&D of any variety. Most of it goes to the Sunday expression or supporting it in some way. It's a disaster. I mean, honestly, it is a disaster waiting to happen.
Yeah.
And but here's the thing: if I have any hope in this, it's not going to feel good, but we will be smaller in the future. We will be definitely poorer, but we will be better.
Yeah.
And I think the reality is that God
honest.
We'll be more honest. God works with remnants, and it's a thing. And throughout history, you can see this is true. And I think what's coming down the line, just with AI, we were just riffing a little bit with the disruptive. It's going to disrupt the middle classes more than anything else, the educated. And educated classes are going to be taken down. So, you know, the whole economic system of the Babylonian church, if you will call it in your language, is going to, you know, it's got 3 or 5 years, and they're going to have their asses handed back to them big time, just on that alone. You know,
That's a
Yeah,
crazy analogy that the educational element of our world will go down the quickest with AI.
Yeah.
And that's what the church has been based on.
it's knowledge workers, and that's what we
Yeah.
do. Yeah.
Taylor, you were talking earlier about someone that had posted about all these lessons learned over years in ministry, and then like the reference to that as failure. I was thinking about this piece of the conversation then while we were talking about that is like seeing that as a failure, and just the oddness to think that something laying down its life is a failure in a path of following the one who lays down his life. And then the clinging to life, the unwillingness to lay down a life, is actually what I think is at the core of Babylonian spirituality. We were just a couple episodes ago, we were talking about Babylon and this whole, like, you know, out of this unwillingness to lay our lives down. This is where Hugh pointed out, like, this was an actual line in the sand for Jesus, that like this was the call to come and die. And at some level, like, just as you guys are talking, like watching about, like, we'll do anything it takes to consolidate or do whatever it takes. And just thinking about how, you know, I always think of, like, you guys opened the book with the pandemic and the effects of the pandemic on like Sunday centric kind of gathering and whatever. And when that started, I think I may have mentioned this once before, but like, you know, you kept hearing people refer to that as like an apocalypse. And interestingly enough, that means to unveil, right? Like, it actually got the curtain pulled on it a little bit.
Peekaboo.
And the actual, like, spirituality is out for all to see. And you know, one of the things that I know you were talking about, if I find hope in something, I guess as you were saying that, I was like, I actually think there's a lot of hope in laying down the life of this thing, like that actually, whether it's a rug pull or a decision made by disciples, like, we know what comes from laying down your life. We know that resurrection follows death. Like that kind of, like, we will be better. We will be poor. It will be hard, but we will be better. It's an exciting promise.
Yep.
Yeah.
But you know, guys, I think more and more, like, I love metaphors. You guys are using beautiful metaphors, by the way. I think metaphors carry a huge amount of code, but I'm more and more vested. I love seeds. You know, like, I look at the seed, man. Seeds are incredible things. You know, like, one seed can actually lay dormant for centuries, and then under right conditions, boom.
Yeah.
And I actually think,
Hmm.
you know, and I also I use the phrase, like, in every, because I'm a movement kind of dude, right? I believe in movements, and the seed is like a perfect metaphor for movement, because in every seed is the potential for a tree. Every tree is a potential for a forest. It's all contained in the smallest part. And so I'm more and more intrigued about this idea of seeding, you know, ideas or people or communities being seeds of the future. Yeah, we got everything in us that's able to reproduce a forest. Every human being has a movement in them. You know, every Jesus follower has a movement in the making.
Well, like, when I get asked, like, what will really get this thing moving in a positive direction, I go, just the right conditions, because COVID was not apparently a bad enough condition.
Yeah.
You know, but honestly, things could get way worse. And I think under the right circumstances, the church will do what it's supposed to do. Like, and it's because it's the people will sniff it out and they'll figure it out.
But all the admirers of Jesus will disappear, because it'd be too hard for them to follow, you know?
Yeah.
There'll be a stripping back. But I said, God works with remnants. It seems to me to be consistent with the Bible, you know?
So there's our encouraging word for the world.
I know. I feel
Just need the right
I
conditions.
don't like it. I like comfort. You know, unfortunately, dang it. As you get older, man, it's just like, this is where you guys challenge me beautifully, to put things back on the table, you know. I find myself trying to kind of bunker down, you know, and it's not appropriate, you know.
Yeah.
So
And we were
that's
just
my
talking
challenge,
even
man.
before
Get
we
on the
got
road
started.
again.
just, you know, our desire even to see young leaders lead out of even our local context here. We've decided, Taylor's not old enough, but he's already decided that, you know, we're not going to take leadership. We're not going to insert ourselves and try to, you know, rally the troops. Like we feel like our job is to kind of model it. But you know, maybe even a final word, Alan, from you. When you think about the younger generation right now, it seems like many of them are afraid to innovate. There's a natural fear with the millennial crowd and those that are coming after. One of my favorite books of yours, Faith of Leap. You talked really about the adventuresome spirit of the church, and maybe even tie it into APES, because I think, you know, naturally people that are highly oriented towards the apostolic, Taylor, myself, you guys, you don't need a lot of motivation for that level of apostolic. They almost can't not do it. But a lot of the church are not high A's, right?
No.
And culturally they struggle. They don't think they can succeed. Would there any little Faith of Leap thing you could give us as we hit the road?
In the realization of how strongly the failure of nerve has entered into the next generation of leaders.
Yeah. Well, I think in the generational studies, others would probably be better than me, but I would say this much. Changes in our overall conditions can precipitate new ways of being, which is the Faith of Leap is about this engaging in liminal circumstances, which are disorientation, danger, ordeal, challenge, adventure, risk. It precipitates a new way of being, which is communitas and all that. So that book explores that. And you're right, it's one of my favorite books too, Hugh. It just was lost a little bit because between Frosty and myself, about 5 or 6 books came out in 1 year, which is downright stupid.
Yeah.
And so, you know, you might buy one Hershey book, but you're not going to buy, you know, 5. So I got a little lost, unfortunately. But I tell you what, I'll need to say 2 metaphors here are quite useful. I'm really intrigued at the moment about this idea of the church of your deepest instincts, which would kind of take you to the kingdom stuff, by the way. And there's this notion in social psychology called the startle reflex. I got to do my American. Startle reflex. Okay. And so, you know, so you play with me here. It's like a really dark night. You can hardly see your hand in front of your face. And you're walking by the side of a mountain. You know it's something like a mountain because you keep bumping into it. And you know, you're scrambling your way through it. And you feel like you've come into an open space because, you know, you're not bumping anymore. And so and you just feel it's bigger. And then darned if there isn't like a really big animal growling somewhere near you. And it's very close and it's very dangerous. And under these conditions, and it's been tested, you'll be able to scramble the side of the mountain in the middle of the night without ever having learned how to mountain climb. And there's something in that. And I think, like, honestly, under certain conditions, people will actually find the resources in themselves that they never ever thought possible.
Yeah.
And I think that's a very useful metaphor. The other one, and by the way, I think that time is coming, actually, where we're going to, you know, discover, like the early church or the Chinese underground church, under conditions of persecution, what I call latent potentials that lie dormant within the church, that are there, but they're dormant. So they need certain conditions will bring them to bear. There's another little sucker called an immortal jellyfish. And this is an interesting little dude. It's immortal because it's the same jellyfish that's always been around, right? And genetically, it's like the same one that was 4,000 years ago. And what it does is, when it's under threat, it dissolves into protoplasm and sinks to the bottom of the ocean. And at the bottom of the ocean, out of the protoplasm comes thousands of new jellyfish. There's that seed idea again too. And I think it's a really powerful metaphor too, is that if the mega church sinks to the bottom of the ocean, maybe out of that we can actually see some reproduction that's on scale, you know.
That's it. I mean, I think that's the perfect landing, because what's so great about this conversation is anybody who's listening is probably at some point in this hour and 15 minutes going to feel really depressed. Like, well, what the hell do we do then?
Yeah, we become a protoplasm and we sink to the bottom. That's what we do.
But if I had a hope for this, Alan, it was, in a sense, without any form of flattery, but just with honor, like to sit at your feet for a second and say, hey, man, what do you see? Because I don't think people see it. I think people are blinded or distracted by all of the bright lights and all of the set tables around them, all the fancy food and their busy lifestyles. And I'm going, hey, I feel like sometimes we're standing out on the highway waving our hands saying, this isn't looking good. But in reality, if we press ourselves enough, we actually are excited, because we kind of feel like, no, we're being moved into a time of crisis. And in that time of crisis, I think C.S. Lewis called it like wartime. We really tend to rise up. The remnant rises up and links arms and does some incredibly innovative things. I don't know that we all would have volunteered to be a part of that time of crisis. We would have rather just been in the good old days. But I do feel like you've given us hope there. Like, look, this is coming. If you want to, sit in your living rooms and let the TV wash over you and pretend like it's not happening, that's fine, but it is happening. And there are some prophetic voices trying to warn and say, it's not necessarily a terrible thing.
No.
But it's happening. So let's link arms together. Let's stop being so unbelievably divided against each other. There is something special about John 17 that maybe that's forced back on us, where we take on the nature of Jesus and the Father becoming one. And we start to actually work together again, despite some of our methodological and theological and practical differences, racial differences, political differences. My goodness. Like, I do think,
Oh my gosh,
there's a moment where we can go, you know what? These things actually aren't as important as we thought they were. The glory of God is here. It's at stake. We get to carry it, all those things. So I feel hopeful just in the fact that you're ending this with, we're about to be invited into a really unique seam in history to rise up again.
Yep.
one grand oh shit moment, right? But yeah, but bro, the Bible, I mean, you read the book of Hebrews, the church is doing it hard and it's all there, the book of Revelations, there are moments that you mentioned already, just like, where the church does go through persecution. I think we've got to always be prepared to be faithful in those conditions too, because God can use us in ways that we just didn't know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a challenge, but I think we got to prepare our hearts for it. And yeah,
that latent potential idea is really powerful to me. And I just like a reminder to everyone listening, like, beyond the church and the movement of God and the kingdom personally, like each of you, I would bet this across the board. If you think back to some of the hardest things you've been through, some of the traumas of your life or the worst things that you've been through, if you survive them, right? On a long enough timeline, those tend to be some of the richest, most powerful, transformative things that we've ever been through. And like you said, like the community that's born out of them, when we go through them together, we are made one or united in ways that are unbelievable. And we know this just in our own memory. Like our memory holds on to those things more than anything else, maybe because they're treasures. And maybe there's a collective version of that we're looking forward to. And it's weird to go gloom. Isn't this exciting?
Well,
It's so
it's a call to be brave.
Yeah.
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 Yep.
Oh,
Yeah.
It's a good word, bravery. Yeah.
hey, Alan, thank you, bro.
Well,
Thanks for
I love you guys very much. I'll go on record.
well, same to you. Say hi to lovely Debs for us, and can't wait. I'm a little envious. We don't just get to hang with you guys in Florida, so enjoy your time together.
Well, come on down.
I'm going to Iceland tomorrow, Alan.
Yeah.
Go on up.
Going up. Going up. Let you know if I return or not.
All right, boys.
Chill out in Iceland.
Yeah, man.
I'm
Enjoy
gonna
it.
chill out. All right.
Love
See
y'all.
ya.
God bless.
See ya.
Bye bye.